Welcome to the Wed Pro Podcast, the show for wedding professionals and business owners.
Each month, we bring you top industry experts, business chat, and hints and tips to grow your business.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Roxy.
Welcome to the Wed Pro Podcast.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Wed Pro podcast. Today we are joined by the amazing Jenni from the Handmade Sign Company, and today we're going to be covering all things branding with you.
So thank you very much, Jenni, for joining us. For those of you, we've kind of known you now for almost a year, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was last May I joined Twizen, and then June I became the BA for last year. So yeah,
it seems so much longer. But yeah, we wanted to kind of pick your brains today and go through kind of your business, your branding knowledge, and kind of share some kind of hints and tips for wedding business owners out there regarding branding, because it is something that we see people
have a struggle with.
And not always know that they have a struggle with it.
Yeah, that's it. I think
I think not a lot of people kind of respect branding until they get to a certain stage in business, and then they realise what it can do for you. It's something since I left my career as a designer, that I've kind of tried to push people to consider it more early on, because it's a good jump start into business if you get it right first time.
100%. And I think
it is. I think when people start any kind of business, maybe it's not in the front of their mind, to concentrate on the branding. But like you say, it's absolutely vital.
Yeah. Well, I think people think that they are thinking about branding by, maybe thinking, right, I'm going to start a business, and maybe people in the wedding industry in particular, some people will definitely resonate with this, that they might kind of fall into becoming a wedding professional or fall into becoming a wedding supplier, and it's not something that they thought necessarily that they were going to do as a career, and they think the branding goes as far as a business name and a logo and some colours, and that's as you say, they get to a level in their business where they kind of think, right, okay, this needs to be more strategic than that, and more more thought out and consistent across the board. So I mean, we know you, but for those people who are listening who don't know you, it would be really great for people to kind of hear about your background. And you mentioned that you had a career as a designer, and then how you got into the wedding industry as well. So
I currently run the Handmade Sign Company, so wedding professionals might know me in the area. So I do the wedding signage, I do calligraphy and wedding signage. I was the East Midlands regional winner at the Wedding Industry Awards, and recently national highly commended as well. So I only started that business January 2019.
Amazing.
So it's been a really good first year. But prior to that, I was 14 years in graphic design. So when I left, I was the creative director of a brand agency here in Leicester. And that's been my entire career. And then I just decided, no, I've had enough. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to do this wedding signage. So that was a bit of a change. But branding is still a big part of my life. And I do think the success I've had in my first year of business has been helped greatly by my branding.
I mean, we speak now, don't we? And we speak to a lot of wedding professionals, obviously, in what we do, and we come across a lot of businesses, mainly on social media, don't we? When we might, obviously, with what we do and our network on social media, that we do come across, and those people with strong branding. And I think actually when Roxy came across you for the first time,
that's the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh my life, her branding is just on fleek.
Yeah, so like you say, that you kind of came with that bit of background, didn't you? As in, right, let's get this right first time, rather than a point.
Well, for me, a lot of people when they go self-employed will do it in a transitional stage. I didn't. I just quit one day and then was like, right, well, I've now got to pay the bills. we can't afford just to run on my husband's salary. I've got to bring money in each month, so I've got to make it work. And so in my second month of business, I was at the NEC National Wedding Show, and I, launched my branding like full on. I just knew it had to be right. So, and it's worked. It's been really successful for my first year, and I haven't had to do anything to support myself. So, I do think branding is a big key part of that, really.
No, and that's great. And then, I come out, like you say, that transition into wedding supply, that's kind of where my background is. And obviously on our first podcast, we spoke about the background and how we started the bridal shop. Yeah. And that's exactly like, when you look at that being an afterthought, people normally look at, right, what is it that I want to do? And then they think about the branding kind of afterwards, where it's interesting that you kind of, from the get-go in your mind, like, let's get this key and get this right. And like you say, that you attribute quite a lot of your success to that. I mean, it took us, it probably took me a little while. Like you said previously, people get to a stage in their business where they start to consider brand as something that is just more than their logo, or just more than the colours or the fonts that they use, or maybe the aesthetics on their website, and more of a feeling. And for us, we had a physical premises and a shop, and I think quite a lot of the branding and the feeling of our business, I would talk a lot to the staff about, and we would talk about it, that everything kind of had to flow and fit into
fit into that jigsaw for it to kind of work as a whole.
Even the vibes in the shop, the language we were using in the shop, the way that we decorated the shop, everything had to fit, was a puzzle that fit into what our overall kind of brand, and also the audience that we were kind of going after. I mean, for us, we started this business, and our kind of USP was that we wanted to provide affordable bridal wear in the East Midlands. And way back when we kind of started it 10 years ago, there wasn't really anybody really doing that. And for me, as that kind of like progressed further down into the business, it was making sure that everything, the shop window, everything kind of fit into that brand of not just affordable bridal wear, but that was a big key part of it, wasn't it? And fitting into that kind of brand. So where do you find that most businesses kind of start with their branding?
I think you were right to touch on that people kind of go into it a bit backwards with branding. So as a designer, when people used to come up to me, they'd be like, well, I need a new logo. And you'd be like, well, why do you need a new logo? Well, I just don't like the look of it. Well, no, that's not the way to look at it. Because I think a lot of people, when they start creating their brand, they think about what they like and don't really think about
your customer, their client.
It's not about you. This is about your customers. And people don't even think, oh, well, I've got this product. I'm going to call myself this, and this is going to be my logo. I've designed it on whatever program that they might have on their computer, and think that's it. But actually, they've designed that to just look maybe aesthetically pleasing to them, and not identified, well, who is my target customer? What are they looking for? How am I going to help them? What problem am I going to solve for them in their life? And if you don't do that, then your logo is not really going to speak to the people you need it to speak to. And then you kind of find things like you're getting approached by the wrong type of people. You might, for me, for what I do, my items are more expensive. You can grab a cheap sign from the range, for example. They're not my target customer. And my avatar of customer is more of a luxury high-end wedding, and they respect the work that goes into the handmade items, because everything I do is handmade, made to order, and personalized. And so there's no point me making my brand look cheap to appeal to the people that might be picking up wedding signage from the range and B&M and things like that, because then they're only going to get disappointed when they then ask for a price and go, well, I'm not going to pay that. And I'm going to get disappointed that I think that I then can't sell what I need to sell to make any money off it, actually make it a viable business.
And that's a good point that you kind of touched on there, Jenny, that some people might be feeling that in their business, you know, kind of, it is disheartening, isn't it, to be kind of being approached by the wrong type of client, both ends of the spectrum. And getting that branding, and like you say, you attribute branding as a key kind of factor into that making sure that you are targeting those right people, so that you don't have to, as a business owner, be having those kinds of conversations with people.
Yeah, exactly. And people just don't actually consider, you know, we've probably all heard the phrase that it's not, you know, brand isn't just a logo. I think it's been coined a lot nowadays. But it's totally true. It's not. You've got to think about the whole bigger picture. It's how people perceive you. I mean, for me, I did a lot of wedding fairs last year, and I was constantly approached. Oh, I already know you. And do you know what? Even though they might have seen someone else doing wedding signage on Pinterest, they immediately felt like it was mine, because my brand, for whatever reason, I assume because of how strong my branding was that they felt that they knew me, and any wedding signage they ever see is going to be me because I'm at the forefront of their mind, which is great, because now it's like other people online are essentially advertising for me. And go, oh, it's mine. Yeah, that wasn't mine. And it's just the power of branding. It can do so much for you. And yeah, people just need to give it a bit more credit where it's due. And if you are struggling to attract the right type of customers and charge what you want to charge, then the first thing I always suggest to people is look at your brand, because it's probably that it's just not working the way it should. I've always been, even at the brand agency I worked for, when I rebranded them, we were constantly told that we looked like a luxury kind of high-end brand. And actually we weren't. We were at the bottom of the market budget-wise for branding. But it was just the impression you give across. And that's just how great branding can be, that it can do that for you. So, yes, it's a good thing.
So what would you say, you know, people listening to kind of this thinking, right, okay, either that they want to kind of confirm to themselves that their branding is where they want to be in their business, and quite a lot of people as well will start a business, and then, you know, 2 years down the line or 3 years, once they've got their branding, they don't really ever come back and think about it again. It's something that's done at the beginning. All those people who might be thinking, oh, you know, the branding, maybe my branding isn't kind of working for me, or what should I need to do? So where do you think the businesses should kind of start when they're kind of looking at their branding or peeling
so
back?
They should start, and this is regardless of what stage you are in your business, initially, like if you've been going a while, do an audit. And even if you think the branding is working, you should still do an audit every now and then, just to see, because there might be things in there that you've not actually realised. So an audit is things like you'll do customer research, so you'll find out, well, what are the key elements that they prefer about your brand, you know, why did they choose you? And that's a really good one to do, because you might become a bit complacent after a while, thinking, yeah, all my customers are happy, but you know, if they all bring up the fact that, oh, I really was disappointed with delivery or something, then you know that moving forward you've got to address that. And audit is also looking, so if you have all of your materials, so let's say a screenshot of your website, your flyer, your business card, roller banner from your wedding fair, if you put it all laid out on the floor in front of you, does it all look consistent? And if it doesn't, then you kind of, and that naturally happens as businesses get older. Things do start to change, and then you do get those inconsistency problems arising, which I'll touch on later. But that's a big thing in audits, just to make sure that everything is sort of on the same.
I think
it's kind of aligned. Yeah.
I think as well, it's important to kind of look at what it is that you do. And, you know, when people first start their business, they might potentially have started, you know, doing one thing, and as that's evolved, they've maybe added wedding planning to the service that they do, and they might have added something else to the service that they do, and that kind of audit, you know, and you don't really think about it as you evolve your business. Exactly. But then,
because it's even, you know, a lot of people when they get started, they might call themselves, for example, I'm called the Handmade Sign Company. There's never in my plan to do anything else other than signage. But let's say I started doing flowers well, the Handmade Sign Company does not make sense as a brand anymore. It doesn't speak the whole truth of everything that I do. So yeah, and it is something you kind of as time goes on, you might not actually realise. So an audit's a good way to sort of acknowledge those issues, I suppose. And it
is interesting what you said, chatting to customers and chatting to those ideal customers, not just anybody, your mum, your friends and family, your best friend are not necessarily ideal clients, but actually chatting to your customers and saying to those, what is it about my business name that you liked, or what drew you, do you have any particular feelings about? And you would be surprised actually about how many people will tell you. Here's an example. So when we first started, way back when, 10 years ago, kind of I was 22, 23 years old, we had the word affordable in our business title. And this was because we were one of the first affordable bridal wear suppliers on the market. And I really wanted to drum in that was, when we wrote down what it is that we did.
This is what we are,
This is what we are. And I wanted it to come across really strongly. Now, very quickly, I realised that was making us
cheapening us
because the experience that we weren't giving and the thing that we wanted to give people was an amazing experience, no matter, your budget of your wedding dress. And, people spending kind of £300 to £500 on a wedding dress, it wasn't like a 30 quid, 40 quid wedding dress. And that word affordable was making people feel like the experience that they were going to get was something like a flea market. Or
I think that word affordable and then the experience we gave was very disjointed. And
it actually took a lot for me to drop that, because I was so convinced at the beginning.
Even when we'd post on social media or wherever or whatever we spoke about, that word was just naturally
would come out a lot. So, and it took me a while to kind of listen to people and think, okay, actually this isn't right for our brand anymore. And as you get more experience in business and more experience in and more comfortable in your kind of market and where you're sitting, that audit is really important to do.
I think those little tiny tweaks will make such a massive difference as well, won't they?
Yeah, and so all the information you kind of get from the audit, so for example, the word affordable, that would come up in the audit going, well, hold on, is that attracting the right type of customer that we want? Is it portraying the right image? You can then put into a strategy and it helps you address those issues. So a strategy is like, it's almost like your rule book of how your brand will speak moving forward. And part of that is addressing those key values that you want to put across. So yes, you're affordable, but actually, is that more important than the high level of experience that you want to put across? So no, then actually the key value is the experience. And so a strategy kind of just puts those, I suppose, guidelines in place so that when you're creating new marketing materials, new copy, even uploading anything on social media, that it should align with those values, and then it will fit with the brand and it will portray the right image. So, for example, with the affordable thing, if you had a really high-end luxury brand, let's say, and it looked like, really expensive, but then you use the word affordable, it's totally not on the same page.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure that everything aligns, and that's what a strategy does. If you follow it, then you know that it's going to make sure everything's consistent and you are attracting that target audience.
I think the words, kind of strategies and audits do kind of scare
and even the word branding, I think
some people when they start businesses, and people, especially in our industry, some people may feel, I do what I do because I love to create stationery, or I love flowers, and I love, and these kinds of things are kind of an afterthought. But kind of why we've got you to kind of come on and chat is that getting this stuff kind of right from the beginning. You still need customers, otherwise you're not going to have a business long term. You can run on gusto and energy, and you might love the fact that you make stationery, or you love flowers, and you can do it really, really well. But if you are not attracting the right type of customers at the price that you need to sell those to make a profit, it's never going to be a business, is it?
And the other thing is, especially in the wedding industry, like the competition in the wedding industry is one of the highest. I mean, photographers, florists, you think how many, even at like the networking events and everything, there's so many. And so you've got to find a way to make you stand out from them. And the only way to do that is really with your brand and getting yourself out there. And branding's a great way to do that. And otherwise you do just get lost in the sea of competition. And it's hard. It's going to be a hard, I mean, there's plenty of brides and grooms for all of us, but you know, how do they distinguish you from the next? It's a difficult one. So yeah, branding is a big vital key, and a strategy will help you do that. It will help you work out what it is that distinguishes you from.
And also, like you say, the market is saturated with other businesses, but then as well, there are plenty of couples to kind of go round. It's about finding those couples, isn't it? That the couples that align with your strategy and align with your business and align with your brand. And once you are clear on your brand, finding those couples is much, much easier. And those couples finding you is much easier. And this is why, you coming at it with a little bit more experience than I came at it when I first started our business, is a massive, massive plus. But I think a lot of people, start the way around that, I kind of started, or, I love doing this and it's an afterthought. And then it does seem like this minefield of competition.
I mean, even when I Google branding, it scares me, and I know what it is. Really, it is a minefield understanding branding, and I wish I could call it something different other than like brand and audit and strategy. But it is what it is, but it doesn't have to be difficult. There's lots of tools out there, even on the Twizen Teachable site. There's obviously the things about the strategy. Like there's loads of things out there for different budgets that you can do and work it out for yourself. You don't have to pay someone to do it. But it's just getting one of those, it's trying to get people to understand why.
Yeah, and I think if people kind of take that kind of end goal is going to help your business and also help you feel not so overwhelmed in, a sea of, other suppliers and to help you stand out there in your business, it is kind of a good thing. And I always think, these kinds of tasks, audit strategies, I didn't start my business to think about strategies and audits, and I started my business because I love what I do, but actually focusing on well, that's going to help me do what I do better is then going to give me that kind of goal to get it kind of done and looked at.
I mean, as a example of what it's done for me, obviously I'm only a year in, and obviously I've achieved quite a lot in that year. And what I kept getting even 6 months into my year last year was people in my industry going, oh, I can't wait to be at the stage where you are, where you've been at it for years. And I was like, well, no, I've only been at it for months. But it was just the image that I was portraying online and through my marketing that made me look like, well, no, I know what I'm doing. I've been here a long time. And actually, I was very new to the wedding industry. I didn't know anything about wedding industry. I got married 7 years ago. It's changed a lot since then. So that's just a prime example of what branding, if you get it right, even amongst your competitors, you look like you are, a big player, and actually brand new. So it was, it's been a good, that's a good example of what branding, if you get it right, can do.
And that's great. So like you said, okay, so once people have kind of done an audit and a strategy and they're kind of like looking at those marketing materials, and I think a lot of people will be surprised when they do look at those marketing materials and think, okay, actually some of this disjoint across a lot of people listening thinking when the last time that they may have done their roller banner was, compared to each and every time you kind of run out of business cards. I bet people change the way that they do their business cards for the next kind of one.
It's natural. As your business develops, each thing will change, but you've got to just make sure that you are staying on that message. I mean, even me, last year when I started the business, I ordered 10,000 flyers because I was like, well, how many will I need? I've still got thousands left.
We were
they totally now don't speak what I need it to speak, so they're all going to get recycled and I'll have to order new ones. But then I also get that budget, sometimes if you amend your brand, you can't always afford to then change everything. But as long as each new thing you do, that's why the strategy is good, as long as each new thing that you do stays in that strategy, even if it slightly changes, you're still giving the same message. So that's why the strategy is good.
And this is it as well, like, on that point, you know, your brand will naturally change anyway, and maybe you'll make subtle changes. And I think it's Coca-Cola. Like, if you look at Coca-Cola, you think that logo has been the same for forever, and actually it hasn't. It's just
gentle
very tweaks and changes. But even in their message, and you know, like, Coca-Cola is very predominant with like personalization now. Like, that wasn't a thing 4 or 5 years ago. But you know, their core message is about social and stuff like that. That's kind of stayed the same predominantly throughout. So it's like you say, having that core kind of thing, or having that strategy, so that when do things, or you've got the budget to kind of change things, that it does fit in with that strategy or message of what you're kind of wanting to say.
Yeah, and when you've got that strategy, it guides things. So when you come to actually, you know, if you've got your strategy in place and you then move on to sort of actually creating the elements in the brand itself, the brand identity, it kind of guides that. So I'll kind of like look at colour, for example. A lot of people overlook, they pick, well, I like pink, so I'm going to put pink in my logo. Well, okay, but you know, if you are a male brand, is that really going to target the right customers? Just because you like pink, they probably won't.
And then so even like you say, pink, there are different kinds of pink, isn't there? And I think initially people look at, I mean, I'm sat at the minute looking at my daughter's headphones that across the room, and they are hot, cheap plastic pink. That's kind of, and people will kind of associate certain shades or whatever.
Certain
feelings or thoughts to go with your brand, won't they? And it's something that you might not personally think, because you just love the colour and you just run with it because you love the colour, but it does go much more
deeper
than that.
Yeah, it does. There's a massive amount of psychology behind colour that people don't realise. Every colour has a meaning, but then there's pros and cons between each colour, and then obviously the different shades. So like my brand colour is a blush pink, but and that's because it fits with my brand values of being romantic and relaxed brand, I suppose, and a high-end brand. Whereas if I use the hot pink, that gives a totally different impression. It might not change my brand at all, and use hot pink, it just wouldn't work, and it wouldn't attract the right people. And you've got to, going back to Coca-Cola, they use red because red typically incites the feeling of hunger and things like that. So it's one of those minefields of colour. But it is hard when you are sat then, especially if you're designing a logo yourself, working out, well, what colour do I use?
What would you say? Do you say to people kind of write down some words or some buzzwords that represent your brand, or if you've got a strap line, where do you kind of work when people are thinking about?
The words would come from your strategy, so your brand values. That they are the key terms that you want to portray, and you kind of then look at those. So if you're looking at colour, it kind of breaks into an initial colour psychology of the seasons. So you've got your spring, summer, winter, autumn. It's a bit of a minefield to get your head around. I could talk about colour psychology for ages, but it does play like a really important role. And once you determine what season your brand values best fit in, it then helps you work out what kind of tone of colour you should be looking at, so what sort of shades and things like that. So as a guide, like spring is typically bright warm colours, so that's for like creative businesses that are bursting with energy. Summer, that's what I am, so that's like the cool, delicate and muted tones, so that's for like romantic, graceful, elegant businesses. Autumn, they're very like organic, earthy, warm tones. They're kind of like intense and muted sort of colours. And then you've got winter, think about the minimalist brands, black and white, they are winter. They use like really bright, so hot pink, vivid colours with the black and white. And that's for obviously like dramatic cutting edge, if you want to give that impression off. And then once you've kind of worked out what season you are, you can then say, right, well, any colour I pick has to, so I know if I introduce a new colour to my brand, then it's got to be a cool colour to fit with that summer season. And everything, and it doesn't just work for colour, you can do textures and things like that. It does all kind of piece together. It makes everything feel cohesive and familiar, if that makes sense. It's a bit of a minefield, colour psychology, but when you read up on it, it's really interesting.
It's really interesting. I've never heard of it like kind of that before.
No. And we can, anyone that's listening, they can have a little Google and lots of things will come up, right? About, just kind of breaking.
I'd highly recommend listening or reading books by Fiona Humberston. She's really good, and she talks a lot about the colour psychology and the seasons. She goes into a lot more detail.
What we'll do is we will pop a link to that in the notes so that people can kind of find out more about that if they kind of want to. So yeah, that kind of links into your kind of colour. What about, copy? And this is a big one that people kind of don't really realise kind of fits into your brand.
So there's two elements to copy. There's obviously the actual copywriting itself in terms of how you're portrayed, and then there's the style of fonts and typography, which also people overlook.
And I think that's a big one, just to kind of touch on that. I mean, I think if people will kind of go and look at their website, especially those that kind of made the website themselves, and look at different pages, are your fonts cohesive across the kind of pages? Are your fonts cohesive on your business literature and actual literature that you were kind of marketing materials that you would hold in your hand as well? And it's not just about the logo being the same, is it? But even your website to your business cards, having the same
Facebook page,
having the same sort of fonts, than the graphics kind of make it.
Same as colour, fonts have different meanings too. I mean, you speak to any designer, we'll all have something against Comic Sans. Obviously, it's one of the most fonts out there, but we all hate it. And I see it all the time, and I cringe every time I see it. Even businesses, let's say you are out of the wedding industry. Let's say you're a banker and you use a Comic Sans. Am I going to trust you with my money if you're using a font like Comic Sans?
I think,
no.
People will know that you see those kind of quirky fonts, and there are thousands of fonts now, aren't there? Like
fonts of hellfire.
There's fonts everywhere. That people can there are the more serious ones, there are the more dramatic ones, there are the more ones with even kind of pictures and all sorts of kind of craziness going on in them. And it's about that also fitting into that kind of message and into that strategy of what kind of who you are as a business, what you do as a business, what are your values. What about like the tone in the copy then, and how do people make sure that is right for their brand?
Again, that's where the strategy will come in. So as long as you've got those key messages sort of agreed in your strategy, and your strategy will outline, even usually when we did a strategy, we'd actually write an initial kind of description of the business, and that will set the tone of how you should write. And you've got to just make sure it fits with those brand values. So, but the one thing I would say is, especially in the wedding industry, the one thing that's going to make you unique is you. So getting your personality, making it sound like it is you, and it's not. So it's all right getting a copywriter. I use a copywriter to help me write my blogs because I'm rubbish at writing and I generally can't be bothered to write half the time. But I still then will go through whatever she's written to make sure I add my personality into it. So it's not cold and just feels like I've just taken a template off somewhere and gone with that. So you just need to make sure that you write it in a way that translates you and your values across, basically. And that's
really important with the consistency side of it, isn't it? As to how you write. Now, people will think, I can use a slightly more relaxed tone, maybe if I'm chatting on Instagram or I'm writing some copy for social media, then I can via my website maybe, or business literature, I want, you know, that to be a bit more of a serious tone. And it is a balance, isn't it, kind of getting that right to still be in the same kind of voice of your brand, like that overall voice of your brand, to be consistent throughout. Like you saying that you kind of go through that copy, you know, something that I kind of struggle with, and this maybe people will relate, you know, some days I'm absolutely amazing at writing copy, and and other days, and you know, the words come, and you know,
oh, I've got my flow today,
and we can be quite fun with the way that we write our copy. And then other days maybe we've got a bit more of a serious message that we want to kind of portray, or perhaps, you know, this week for example I've been writing a book, and because the book that we're writing is quite
but it's serious.
It's not. It's a book about.
It's a learning book.
Yeah. So, you know, I kind of feel like
you're a bit like
it's a bit disjointed. Like I'm feeling. I need to go back through it, like you say. I need to go back through it and stamp me and others all over it all. But you know, some days I just find that easier than kind of other days to kind of do. But for those people that are kind of seeing our work with fresh eyes, that piece of copy is going to send a message about your business, or that picture that they see, or that logo that they see sends a message about your business.
Yeah.
For me, copy, I think, is something I've kind of struggled with, but I'm really kind of trying to get to grips with it. Probably the last few months I feel a lot better. And for those that think that copy's not that important, and it's not so personal to you, the way that Katie writes, the way that you write. Remember when we were doing the training and things, and I was writing things and you were reading it over, you was like, that's not how I say that. But it came really apparent that the way that I speak is actually different to the way that you speak in writing.
Which is a prime example how your brand can come across. If you're writing, over the 14 years as a designer, I actually did a story about this on Instagram today about, you know, not copying other people's work, and unfortunately people do that with copy as well, and it's like, well, it's useless because it's not you, it's not what you're portraying. You've got to make sure it comes from the heart, and you're, like I say, you are your business, and you is what makes you unique. So you've got to get that across in anything that you do. It's definitely important.
Yeah, I think and this is something that, you know, we've discovered that people kind of struggle with, this you and your business kind of thing. The thing that we kind of say to people is important in any kind of business, but it is especially important in the wedding industry. We're not, you know, for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons being that, you know, we're never going to be corporate, like conglomerates. Have I said that right? Like big corporate faceless companies. That's not how people want their weddings to be. Weddings are incredibly personal to the couple, and you know, your brand, your business values, the trust as well, that trust element that you as a supplier are going to do an amazing job and replicate what it is inside that couple's head and that mind, like bring that to life and bring that vision and that big trust element there. They are only going to get that when they see you, aren't they? And you know, those parts of that brand all come together so that they don't see something and people might not think that this is actually that important, and it's often, like we said right at the beginning, an afterthought,
overlooked
that, you know, you might write in a particular way on your website, and maybe you make it to be quite professional and, you know, to the point, but then actually when they meet you face to face, or you know, they've been given a bit of literature at a wedding fair, or they read an article or something online, and it's totally different. It just leaves people with a bit of
maybe they're like, oh, they're not like I thought they would be.
Just a bit confused, and if they get confused, they just shop around. You don't get a second chance if they are left feeling like they don't really know you, or they don't understand what you do. They're not going to bother sticking around. Just go to the next competitor that they do understand.
And decisions are made that quickly, aren't they? And then people saying, oh, you know, it's not something that I kind of have given much thought about, why good branding is that important, or why, you know, my branding needs to be consistent across the board. But like you say, your end client isn't thinking about, oh, your branding's inconsistent. They're just making a split decision and thinking, right, okay, this isn't for me next, or they continue to shop around.
And whether we like to admit it or not, we all judge books by covers.
100%.
And that's why your brand has to instantly portray and communicate to the right audience. And that's why you've got to do the audit, you've got to do the strategy, you've got to look at your colour and your typography and make sure that everything is consistent. So like I said at the beginning, like I'll go to wedding fairs and people go, oh, I already follow you on Instagram. And they've only pieced together that I'm the same person they follow on Instagram because my branding on Instagram is exactly the same as you see at the fair.
I think this comes down to even like images that are made, you know, like on the apps like Canva and things like that. You need to making sure across the board. And what we do to help with that is we know our fonts in, like we have like a little document. We've got our colours in there with the hex codes. So it's very easy, and it makes it actually a lot easier to make things that you go, yeah, that's me, rather than sometimes in the past I've made things I've gone, oh, that doesn't feel right. But now we know our fonts, we know our colours, bish bash bosh, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing. One thing I always recommend is making what I call a brand bible or a brand guidelines.
Yeah, so we even on like a Pinterest board or something like that, and just saving it to your phone, or you know, it doesn't need to be anything structured that sits in your lovely office at home that most of us have.
The brands I've worked on one-man bands, and they have one little sheet of paper and it says, these are my fonts, these are my colours, and you know, these are my brand values, and that's it. I've worked on brands like Homebase and things like that are literally, you know, this thick.
We've got folded.
Okay, let's keep going. But just having something to at least keep those consistencies in place. So going back to Coca-Cola, someone will look at a colour red and instantly think Coca-Cola. Nothing to do with the Coca-Cola brand, but you'll look at red and think of Coca-Cola, and that you only get that recognition by perfect consistency every time.
And this is good as well, like if that is there, you can then, when you do go and make something, and you know, I'm awful, I'll make content half asleep. That is when I make content. So I'll wake up in the morning and think, right, okay, I'm not going to get out of bed for 35 minutes. You do it early, don't you? Yeah. And I'll sit and make content at 6:30 in the morning from my phone. Waiting for the kids to kind of get up. But you can then go and ask yourself, does this piece of content fit in with what I have set out in my brand values? And you know, some of the time the answer might be no. You might get really, really good at it, and every single time, and it's just a feeling, and you naturally get better at it. People will be better at it than I am. I am not a creative by trade. We opened a retail business. That's what we were in. We were in the retail market. And I'm always very jealous. The first thing I said when we saw your lovely office was like, I'm so jealous. I am always really incredibly jealous of creatives and how naturally it does kind of come to you guys. This kind of stuff, believe it or not, does not come easy.
Definitely not.
To me. And I know a lot of people will kind of feel in the same kind of boat. I do think that creatives probably have the edge slightly, that they can that they
got an eye for it a little bit more.
Yeah, got more of an eye for it than kind of.
Yeah, but I mean, I started doing brand workshops last year to kind of help people, because it's one thing that does frustrate me, that it's like it feels like you have to pay a lot of money for a creative to do it for you, when really you don't. And you know, it's very easy. There's lots of tools out there. I mean, even, you know, I have all of the design software. I could go on my computer and I could design like things for Instagram and whatever, but I tend to use Adobe Spark on my phone because
I love it.
Anyone can download that. It's free. Don't get me wrong, when you first open them, they might look a bit confusing, but they are quite simple to learn once you get used to them.
I think Adobe Spark is one of the easier ones, I think.
I know a lot of people use tools like Canva. I've personally never used Canva.
I was in the same boat as you. I preferred Adobe Spark, and you were the Canva girl.
I'm the Canva girl, but I've got a huge iPad, so it's much easier. I would never do it on my phone. You are brave for doing it on your phone, let me tell you.
But
you've got patience.
I think the thing that I struggle with, and maybe people will kind of relate to this, is that you open those kind of apps and the choice is insane.
Too much.
And actually, it's being strict with yourself and sticking to, you know, you get all of this amazingness that
loads
you want
of templates. You're like, oh, look at that one. You get a little bit.
I would say avoid the templates.
Yeah,
because
always.
those templates won't necessarily fit with your brand. And I know that sounds like, well, yes, but I'm a creative. I can easily create,
change
templates
that.
myself. But all you have to do is go in and set a background colour. You know your colours from your brand guidelines or anything, and your strategy that you've put in place to put in, and then you know your font, and you can put some text over the top. But it's that simple, rather than going through all those templates. Because I think that's when your brand gets muddied.
Yeah, once you start to kind of, it's a minefield, like you say, once you start to kind of get a little bit shop happy with all of those kind of templates, and there will be always something that comes up that looks amazing. And
so many times I've gone and chose a template, and then I've switched and swapped it around, and then like binned it off and started again with it.
And I think
the problem with the templates is then it's not unique to you, because
yes, that's right. Yeah.
the next competitor might also boot up Adobe Spark and pick the same one. So you're like, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Are you the same company? Because you're putting the same images across.
And this is what you were saying about, you know, when you see people take other people's work and, you know, replicate that. And there's one thing taking some inspiration, isn't it? And then, you know, make it, if that aligns with your values and kind of looking at that and taking some inspiration. There's another thing, totally, you use it as an example for the copy, but I think especially in this generation when we are quite visual now, and a lot of what we see on our social media is very visually aesthetically pleasing. Like your brand is visually aesthetically pleasing. You know, I might think, oh wow, Jenni's got an absolutely amazing brand, which you do. You can't just go and then say, right, okay, I love that social media post, I'm going to copy that for my business, bash, pop it out there. It doesn't work.
It's I did a story on it this morning, because it's really disheartening and upsetting when you put time and effort into something and then someone goes and copies it. I have no problem if someone approached me and said, can I use that image? Yes, absolutely, credit me please, but I'm happy for you to share it as long as you credit me. I have, even a couple of months ago, I put a social media post out there, and then I was just scrolling along Facebook and someone else had shared the exact image, but they'd sort of changed it, made it basically, it was almost like it gone pixelated or something, and it didn't look very good. And I was like, oh, so I messaged them politely saying, oh, that's actually my image that I created, would you mind crediting me? And they put their hands up saying they didn't realise, but it's just something to be really wary of, because someone has created that.
And it is easily done for people. You know, maybe that's come once somebody has shared that, you don't know how many more times that then shared, and actually
it's hard
finding the original.
Always find the original creator.
It can be difficult to do, but even, you know, somebody might share some quotes, you might look at somebody's Instagram, and quite often I look at people's Instagram feeds and I'll go and have a look at their home, their actual feed and click through, and it is beautifully branded. And like I say,
it's like it does that when you look at it.
I know,
and they do really stand out, don't they? They're the kind of business.
I get great envy.
The ones that look really clean, really tidy, everything's the same tones and the same filters.
Our Instagram is not like that at all.
I find that difficult, even for me with branding knowledge, like to get a consistent feed, because everything I do, you know, everything's personalised, so people will be picking different colours, different finishes, so I can't consistently make everything look without it looking a bit mismatched, but I do the best I can, making sure the elements around it are controlled.
That's it,
and then I think as well, a good tip that we kind of picked up along the way is that there are going to be times, isn't there, like, you know, we've all got bills to pay. There are going to be times that you take on clients and you take on weddings that perhaps aren't your ideal client, because, you know, you've got a month to fill, and you don't necessarily, if those images don't represent you as a brand, or, you know, maybe you've somebody's asked you, you know, you do lovely signage, but maybe somebody's asked you to do something additionally, and you think, oh, you know, I like this couple, so yes, but particularly I don't want to do that going forward. You don't need to share everything to social media, or everything to your website, or it doesn't need to be a catalogue of every piece of work that you've ever done forever.
No, absolutely. You can totally change it however you like and just make sure the message you are putting across is the correct one.
Yeah, and share those elements. And this is the thing that people kind of get scared about when they think about sharing the you in their business, that, you know, that there are elements, and we are very much open books, and that's okay in what we do, in that we do a lot of networking and coaching and, you know, business, and that, and, you know, our business is us, that we are quite open. But there are things, believe it or not, that we don't share and we keep quite personal. It doesn't have to be, you know, here are my children, this is the school that they go to.
Just give away with whatever you're comfortable with. I think that's kind of the main kind of way to go with that. And I think it's okay to show the you. I don't know where maybe there's like this misconception that as a business you've got to come across as bigger than you are,
faceless.
Yes, yeah. When actually the personal touch is always going to be better.
Especially in weddings.
Especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about this with people last night, and we were saying, you know, where's the line between how much do you share of you and then more of your business? And I personally don't even track that. I just share what I feel is comfortable, because that's me. I hate putting my face out there, but I know that that's why people buy from me, is they know that everything I do is handmade, and it's only me. I work from home whilst I support the kids, and people like that, so that's why I share it. But yeah, there's elements to my life I don't share because to me it doesn't seem relevant to. So I think it's just a personal preference what fits with your brand, really.
And this is about, you know, when taking it right back to the beginning and having that strategy. You know, how much of it is a story, do you think, and having this story, and, you know, around your business, you know, looking at the why did you start your business, you know, you saying that people like you because it is you at home and you don't have a big team and everything's made by you. You know, that obviously comes into your kind of brand story, and getting that kind of message kind of across. For us, you know, one of the things, the reasons why I started the wedding business that we started was, you know, I had an experience when I was getting married, and, you know, having that story, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of made people kind of like me better, or, you know,
relatable.
Relatable, and made them recognize themselves in kind of the business.
Instant connection there. Like, they could see themselves in that. You've
got to know your why. If you don't know your why, then you've not got a strategy. The why is part of the strategy. So if you can't answer why do you do what you do, and you know, what do you do that helps other people, then you've definitely got to start back with the audit and the strategy process, because something's not right. And if you don't know the answers to that, then how are your customers going to know? So yeah, it's a big one, understanding your why, and it is then what elements of the story you share is entirely up to you. Like I say, it's personal preference. I originally set up the business because I suffered with postnatal depression. That's why I left the design world, just because I needed a change. But I only felt comfortable sharing that literally about 5 months ago, was when I first announced it. And actually since then, I feel a lot more comfortable saying, actually, you know, this is why I do what I do. And I've had a lot of support from that. And I got a lot of messages on Instagram, and I, you know, my followers and everything kind of related to me more, going, they really like that part of my story. So sometimes it's a bit scary to share those things, but
100%. And I think everybody has those things, and like you say, that was such a core reason. And for kind of those first kind of 6 months, you kind of felt like, you didn't talk about it that often, or you weren't comfortable in talking about it, and that's absolutely fine. You know, there will be some people that kind of relate to you now. I mean, it was actually you, Jenni, that inspired our first episode of our podcast, because we obviously came and spoke at your Twizzing meeting in December, and we mentioned,
we kind of touched on
kind of our story, and you sent us a message that evening saying, oh girls, you need to talk about this more. So, you know, when we launched our podcast, we sat down and said, right, you know, actually,
let's do our why.
You think that your story, people aren't going to resonate with your story, or, you know, you think that people aren't going to be that bothered that you set up a business for this, that, or that reason, or people aren't going to, you know, maybe you're a stay-at-home mum and you've got into your business so that you can be there for the children at school run times. There are going to be other mums out there and other parents out there that get that, and you know,
you inspired us for episode 0. You did.
And it was funny actually, because we even got messages yesterday of people saying, oh girls, like, you know, I'm in exactly the same boat as you're in, or, you know, I've recently started my business and I was just a mum and now I've started a little hustle at home, and, you know, that's really inspiring. And those people have now bought into our brand, not necessarily purchased anything yet, but maybe, you know, in the future, but
we have a connection now.
We have that starting connection. And this is in the stories of your business and the stories of your brand and how you got started and what makes you you and what makes you unique in your market. There will be people that relate, and, you know, you might think nobody cares about my story.
I was really nervous the days leading up to doing kind of about us, and now I feel like invigorated, and, you know, it's nice to know.
It's a big thing in like business, regardless of what we do. We always feel like we have to put this front on, that we're professional and we have to pretend like we've got everything all in a row and we know what we're doing. Actually, we all have a story behind us that we might be too scared to share. And yeah, like when you shared that at the December meeting at the Leicestershire group, you know, I was obviously already well bought into Twizzin by that point, but I didn't know some of the stuff that you said, and so it did make me even buy in even more. I just thought it was incredibly inspiring. The same thing, you know, WedCon last year, hearing Emma's story. I mean, like, Emma's story like really resonated with me because it was exactly the same. I was like, even like Matt was sat next to me, I was like, it kind of got me a bit upset because like it's literally my story, like it's weird, and
there will be so many people, won't there, that will be like, you know, like you've said and we've said, that will feel like that with your story and whatever the message is in your particular business to the people that are kind of listening, and getting that kind of out there, even if it is just, you know, you might think, and this is, you know, a big part of our story, you might think, oh, you know, I started a business because, you know, I left my career to have children, and, you know, that's not an interesting reason. Believe me, you know, somebody else who maybe has got children and wants to support a, you know, a parent or somebody that's doing it for the reasons to kind of put food on the table for their children, or, you know, they found something that they are absolutely amazing at and they absolutely love working from their little office at home, and they share those bits of snippets about, you know, their office from home. There will be people that will want to buy from you rather than from somebody else, because they have got that connection with you and your brand and those values that you kind of have. So it definitely isn't about this kind of faceless, and the more comfortable you can be with kind of sharing your why, like you said, if you've not got a why,
you need to work it out. If you don't know your why, you've got to work it out, and that's the first starting point of any brand, because otherwise why would a customer pick you over the next competitor?
And how can you possibly, you know, go on to then look at your logo and your colours and things if you don't know kind of your why?
I mean, easy for me to say as a creative, like you say, you know, it's easy to create the aesthetic part of a brand, you know, but if you haven't got that foundation in place and you don't understand your why, you don't know who your target customer is and how you're going to target them, it doesn't really matter. And nothing you create, whether it looks as nice as it does, will not work.
And having this strong brand, and this is something, you know, those of you who listened to kind of the first episode that we did and will kind of know that, you know, you might start out as this one-man band and, you know, you have all of this control over your branding and all of this control, but, you know, as that goes forward, even if you only hire a VA to kind of take over some of the work for you, or you look to outsource some of your materials, or, you know, or you sit at home and your partner or husband or maybe your friend says they're going to do a little bit of work for you to just take some of the admin off, or the wedmin as we call it, you know, having that strategy is so key, because
then you can hand it over and go, there you go.
I'm talking from experience, you know, we had kind of a team of 5, and the girls used to laugh at me actually as to how pedantic I would be about certain things. And you know, if I saw something that was not on brand, I would literally, it didn't matter that it took them an hour to create it, I'd be like, bam, that's gone,
Put it down.
delete.
Delete.
It's only something that when you start to kind of not produce everything yourself, kind of becomes more difficult to kind of control, doesn't it? So having that really solid.
The strategy will help, especially if you've got employees or you then get some in the future, it'll help you all have focus and we always used to make sure you're singing from the same hymn sheet.
Definitely.
And then the other thing is the brand guidelines. So even if you then pay a designer to design a leaflet for you, if you give them this brand guidelines, regardless of whether it's 1 page long or it's 200 pages long, I don't think anyone's creating a 200-page one, but you know,
that'll be a first for everything.
The designer might be a bit like, regardless of how long those brand guidelines are, it means that they've got the information they need to make sure that whatever they create is consistent and fits with anything you've got that's already existing. And
just think,
fits with the brand.
In the long run, it does save time as well, because then, you know, you're not stressing about colours, fonts, things. They're all there. It's all there for everybody.
And the other thing is, what a lot of people don't do, you know, because we also, as a design agency, would design leaflets for brands that are already existing. So we weren't touching the logo, and you'd go, okay, can I have your logo? I don't know if I have that. So like a big tip, just file your logos in a place you'll always remember and back them up.
Yes.
Because that's the other thing, is that, you know, and have them in different formats. So when I've designed a logo in the past for people, I give them in folders, and the folder of like high resolution, these are for print, and then low resolution used for web, and then it will have different files inside that, and I will title the files in different ways so they know, because I know if I hand someone an EPS file, most people aren't going to know what that is.
No.
An EPS, for reference, is the file you will always need for like embroidery, print, anything like that. You could blow it up to the size of Big Ben and it wouldn't lose quality. So it's a key file if you do not have your logo, you definitely need. But most people have no idea what that file is. They can't open it themselves because they don't have the right software. So I title it to say, this is what you need to send to your printer, this is what you need to send to your designer. And just, basically annotate your folders, save them in a place you remember.
Yeah.
And then
this is something like you say, you know, I always, whenever I think about branding or tat, it always leaves me with a massive to-do list, and I'm sure people will be listening today going, okay, right, I need to go and think about that, or tidy that up, or, you know, definitely go and hopefully inspire people to kind of do that audit, like you were kind of saying. Is there any kind of other tips or kind of
I have a little tip around like the colours that you already might have in your business that you think, okay, I use that for that, or I've got this colour on my logo and I'd like to use it more in my images on my social media. There is actually it's like a PNG colour puller. I think it's an app where you can put an image in and then you put your little mouse over it and it will give you
the hex code.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, it'll pull out the hex code. So then you've got that code, and then any other app or whatever you go into, you can type the hex code in and it'll ping that colour up.
Or even when you send it to your person who designs your logo or person who designs your leaflet, it's that colour, because there are, and this is what I struggle with. I should do this more. I should do this more myself.
We've learned this
because there are so many different shades that you think would be our colour blue that aren't our colour blue.
And I'll also remember that when you pick a colour, it will reproduce differently in different instances. So when you print it, it's going to look different to screen. That's just the nature of what colour and screen does. So just be careful when you're picking a colour that you know that. But then when you start, that blue doesn't matter, it's close enough, then that's when you get your inconsistencies.
Yes.
Mm.
Everything looks a bit higgledy-piggledy.
And this is every single time I have a chat with somebody that talks about branding, or every single time I think about, okay, like, you know, some of the time I look at our logo and think, right, okay, that needs some changing. And, you know, we're really similar to you. You started your business kind of 12 months ago. We're 12 months into our business now as well. You know, branding, we kind of thought about what we wanted to kind of achieve,
yeah.
and a lot more experience than when I started, you know, our wedding business branding.
Yeah.
However, some parts of our branding doesn't work for our business, and this now, as a piece of advice to people, get this right now, because, you know, to us at the minute, this is a massive task now, because we've got our branding going into countries worldwide, and we have a lot of people working on content for our brand.
It's vital that it's all singing from the same.
That's the problem. If the brand is not quite right at the beginning and it's growing, then it will restrict the growth of the business, because it just went well, and then you get a bit muddled up. So if you just get it right, the foundation right at the beginning, it just means your business can naturally grow. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're going to have to refresh your brand every now and then. Even me this year, I'm introducing a new colour in, and that's fine to do as long as it still fits. But just, if you just get it right, it will just naturally allow your business to grow without any hurdles in the middle of it.
So for people thinking, okay, right, I want to start from scratch, and I want to, you know, I've done an audit, it's not working, or maybe I'm going to, you know, rebrand. How, you know, you've given people the kind of how do they kind of announce that to the kind of outside world? Like, social media is great for kind of doing that, isn't it, and getting people kind of excited about your brand. You hopefully still have the same why, although maybe some parts of elements to that might have changed along the years. But in terms of, does rebranding need to be as scary as it kind of seems?
I think a big part is where you are in business. If you've been going a long time and you essentially want to start from scratch, then something I would just say, warn to be careful about, because let's say you've been going 5 years. Well, over that 5 years, you have got some brand awareness. And so if you completely change everything, your fonts, your colours, everything, even your brand message, people will think that you've disappeared and, who's the other person? They won't actually make the connection. Obviously, there's ways around it in terms of how you communicate it. You would phase it in gradually, things like that. But most of the time, that's quite a drastic measure, and most people don't need to do quite that significant. It's just little things that even the general public might not notice. Yes, okay, a new logo, but it probably using the same colours or something like that it feels familiar. So that's just one thing I would say. Be wary of.
Like, you know, in the market that we're in, we don't tend to get repeat customers, really, do we? Like, we tend to kind of, we might get people that kind of refer us, and they refer us, come back to that in the sense of a repeat customer. But you know that what was trending 5 years ago might not be trending now, and if you've not kind of looked at your branding and your business for the past kind of that long, that it now is definitely the time to kind of look.
And one thing I would say is making sure when you're doing your logo is making sure that it's not on a current trend or a fad, because it's going to date, and then every year you're going to be redoing it. I mean, my logo is a very basic, really. I'm just trying to find an example for it now. It's a typography logo, which is very simple around it, but it means that regardless of what happens, that will still be in trend, and all I have to do is adapt the materials around it, and then I'm not losing my brand awareness because my logo and my main colour hasn't changed. I'm just adding new things in it. So like you can kind of see.
I was just going to say, is your logo the one that's probably behind you in the big sign?
Oh yes, look, that's fun. Yes. But I mean, you see, I had, because originally when I set up my business, another business was called Cabrelli Design, because I wasn't doing wedding stuff. And then when I entered the wedding industry, I was like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't say what I do. But because I had this brand awareness of who Cabrelli Design was, I was the Handmade Sign Company by Cabrelli Design. That's now at a point this year I've dropped it. So I need to update my sign behind me. And that's a way
it's not a massive jump, is it? Like, that's just that little tweak that you've gone from one thing to another, and as that evolves, as you become a stronger brand, or as as your business evolves into a stronger business, that those kind of little minute changes can kind of start to kind of come about as you.
I mean, most people, for me, I'm a calligraphy business, so most people would assume I'd have a calligraphy logo. I decided not to because my style is constantly changing. Like every month I'm trying a new style of writing, and I didn't want my logo. And the same with anything I design as a designer. Most creatives would be the same. They design something and a month later they're like, oh, I could do that differently now.
I think everybody feels like that at any point in a business. You know, when I look back, the first website that you would look at and you would think, I put that out, or you know, the first images you ever took of your products, and you were so proud to get that out into the big wide world, and then you look back and you think, oh, but
that's how businesses progress, and that's how it should be, because if you're not taking steps kind of to improve, it's not going to happen, is it?
I think it's just making sure that it's consistent and making sure that you've got your strategy in place, and then you'll have a strong brand moving forward. That's my main tip to take away from today.
No, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your chat today. I think, you know,
learned a ton.
Absolutely.
When you think you've already know a little bit, got loads to do now.
I know, always do on this subject.
Thank you so much.
I think it is something that's probably never a finished piece either, is it? Like,
no, when someone says to me, can we talk about branding? I'm like, well, I could literally talk for days, because there's so many. I've hardly touched on any of it really, like what I know. Like I covered the main basics, but you could talk about it for ages. There's so many books out there though, like say the Fiona Humberston books, and she does some podcasts as well, all about branding and colour psychology. I'd highly recommend if you want to kind of learn more really.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's our first proper episode after, I kind of getting to know you one. Those of you that are listening, you can kind of leave us a review. That would be great, and make sure you hit subscribe.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can keep up to date with new episodes when they land.
And we'll be seeing you next month for more wedding business chat.
We will. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.